The weight you are carrying was never meant to crush you. Somewhere along the way, worry convinced you that everything depends on you, that if you loosen your grip for even a moment, life will fall apart. Your mind keeps replaying worst-case scenarios. Your heart stays restless, and peace feels like a stranger you once knew but can no longer find. Yet the truth is simple and confronting at the same time. The reason you are exhausted is not because your problems are too big, but because you are trying to control what was never yours to control. This is the moment to hear a different voice, a voice that calls you out of fear and into trust, out of worry and into rest, out of chaos and into peace. Worry often disguises itself as responsibility. It tells you, if I don't think about this constantly, something bad will happen. It convinces you that anxiety is proof you care. But worry is not care. Worry is misplaced faith. It is faith in uncertainty, faith in fear, faith in your own limited ability to predict and prevent the future. When you worry, you are quietly saying that the burden of tomorrow rests on your shoulders today. And that burden is too heavy for any human soul. Trusting God fully begins when you admit the truth. You are not strong enough to carry the future, and you were never designed to. Worry feels responsible, almost noble, as if constantly thinking about problems proves how much you care. It whispers that if you stop worrying, you stop caring, that vigilance is the price of love and responsibility. But this is one of the most convincing lies worry tells. Worry is not care. It is misplaced faith. It is faith placed in fear instead of in God. When you worry, you are not protecting the future. You are surrendering your peace to possibilities that may never happen. At its core, worry is believing that uncertainty has more power than God. It is trusting imagined outcomes more than divine promises. The mind begins to rehearse worst-case scenarios, replaying them again and again until fear feels more real than truth. In those moments, worry becomes a form of worship. Whatever occupies your thoughts, commands your emotions, and shapes your decisions becomes what you trust most. When worry dominates, fear takes the throne that belongs to God alone. Worry also creates the illusion of control. It convinces you that if you think hard enough, analyze deeply enough, and anticipate every outcome, you can somehow prevent pain or failure. But worry never produces solutions. It only multiplies anxiety. It drains your strength without offering direction. While it feels active, worry is spiritually unproductive. It keeps your body tense, your mind restless, and your heart disconnected from peace. Instead of moving you forward, it traps you in mental circles that lead nowhere. The most dangerous part of worry is how quietly it shifts responsibility onto you. It says, if I don't worry, things will fall apart. That belief places the weight of the future on human shoulders where it does not belong. You begin to live as if everything depends on you, your decisions, your planning, your effort, and slowly God moves from being your refuge to being your last resort. Worry does not reject God outright. It simply forgets him in practice. Misplaced faith always produces exhaustion. You are not created to sustain endless anxiety. Your mind and soul were designed for trust, not constant tension. That is why worry feels so heavy. It is not natural to your spiritual design. When you place faith in fear, your inner world becomes unstable. Fear offers no rest, no assurance, no future hope, only endless what-ifs that steal today's peace. Trusting God fully requires recognizing worry for what it is, a signal that faith has shifted off course. Worry reveals where trust is missing. It exposes the areas of life you are trying to manage alone. This awareness is not meant to shame you. It is meant to redirect you. When you notice worry rising, it is an invitation to return your faith to its rightful place. It is a reminder to ask, what am I trusting more than God right now? Faith placed in God produces peace even before circumstances change. Faith placed in fear produces anxiety even when nothing is wrong. This is why two people can face the same situation and experience it completely differently. One rests, the other panics, not because of the problem, but because of where their faith is anchored. Faith does not deny reality. It determines how you respond to it. Worry magnifies problems beyond their actual size. It makes tomorrow's concerns feel urgent today. It pulls you out of the present moment and traps you in imagined futures. In doing so, it robs you of the grace that exists right now. God gives strength daily, not all at once. Worry demands tomorrow's strength today, which is why it always feels overwhelming. When faith is misplaced, peace becomes conditional. You feel calm only when everything is going well. But when faith is rightly placed in God, peace becomes steady. It remains even when answers are delayed and outcomes are uncertain. This does not mean fear never appears. It means fear no longer leads. Trust does not eliminate challenges. It changes who you rely on while facing them. Letting go of worry is not about forcing your mind into silence. It is about consciously choosing where your faith rests. Each time worry arises, you have a choice: continue feeding fear or redirect trust to God. This redirection may need to happen repeatedly, sometimes many times a day. Trust is not a one-time decision. It is a daily realignment of faith. As you learn to recognize worry as misplaced faith, something shifts within you. Instead of fighting anxiety with more thinking, you begin surrendering it through trust. You stop asking, what if everything goes wrong? And start declaring, even if things don't go as planned, God remains faithful. That shift weakens worry's hold and strengthens peace's presence. Peace does not come from knowing the future. It comes from knowing God holds it. When faith is placed back where it belongs, worry loses its authority. It may still appear, but it no longer controls your heart. Faith rooted in God restores balance, steadies emotions, and quiets the soul. And in that space, peace returns, not because life is predictable, but because trust is no longer misplaced. The deepest source of human exhaustion is not physical labor or emotional struggle, but the silent attempt to carry what was never assigned to you. You feel tired even after rest, overwhelmed even when nothing is immediately wrong, because somewhere within you there is a belief that you must hold the future together. This belief slowly drains strength from your soul. You wake up already tense, your mind running ahead of the day, bracing for problems that have not yet arrived. This is not because you are weak, but because you are carrying a weight no human was designed to bear. From the beginning, human beings were created to live in dependence, not self-sufficiency. Your strength has limits, your understanding has boundaries, and your vision cannot see beyond the present moment. Yet worry convinces you to live as if those limits do not exist. It urges you to plan beyond wisdom, to anticipate beyond control, and to solve beyond your ability. When you try to manage tomorrow while still living in today, your inner world becomes strained. The soul was never designed to stretch that far. The future is heavy because it contains too many unknowns. It holds outcomes you cannot predict, circumstances you cannot prevent, and moments you cannot prepare for in advance. Trying to carry it is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. And with every attempt to hold it, anxiety grows. Peace fades not because life is cruel, but because you are trying to be strong in peace. Places where you were meant to trust. This is where faith becomes essential. Trust begins when you accept your limitations without fear. There is humility in acknowledging that you do not know what tomorrow holds, and there is freedom in admitting that you do not need to. You were created to live one day at a time, drawing strength from God moment by moment. When you try to live beyond that design, your soul becomes fatigued. Restlessness is often a sign that you are reaching for what belongs to God. Carrying the future also distorts your present. When your mind is always ahead, your heart cannot be fully where you are. You miss the grace of today because you are consumed by the uncertainty of tomorrow. The present becomes a place of tension instead of a place of provision. Yet today is the only space where you are promised strength, clarity, and guidance. God does not distribute grace in bulk for a lifetime. He gives it daily, intentionally, and sufficiently. The illusion that you must carry tomorrow often comes from fear of loss or failure. You worry because you love deeply, because you want things to work out, because you are afraid of being hurt or disappointed. But fear cannot protect what you love. It only steals the joy of loving it. The belief that constant concern can prevent pain is false. Pain does not need permission to arrive, and worry does not have the power to stop it. What worry does have the power to do is rob you of peace long before anything happens. When you accept that you were never designed to carry the future, something inside you softens. Your shoulders relax. Your breathing slows. Your mind stops racing. This acceptance is not resignation. It is alignment. You are aligning your life with how it was meant to be lived. Strength flows more freely when you stop resisting your design. Trust grows naturally when you stop pretending to be in con. Control. God's role is not to assist you in managing the future. It is to lead you through it. Leadership requires trust, not control. When you insist on carrying tomorrow yourself, you unintentionally step ahead of God instead of walking with him. Trust invites God back into his rightful place, not as a backup plan, but as the foundation of your life. This shift does not make you careless. It makes you peaceful. Living without the weight of tomorrow does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means doing what you can today with faith and releasing the rest. Obedience belongs to you. Outcomes belong to God. When you confuse these roles, anxiety takes over. When you honor them, peace follows. You begin to understand that your responsibility is faithfulness, not foresight. The future does not need your worry. It needs your trust. Every moment you spend anxiously projecting forward is a moment you are not receiving the strength available now. When you let go of the future, you do not become unprepared. You become present. And presence is where wisdom operates best. Clarity comes when the mind is calm, not when it is overloaded. There is profound rest in knowing that God is already in your tomorrow. He is not waiting for you to figure things out before he acts. He is not limited by your uncertainty. He does not need your anxiety to stay involved. The same God who sustained you yesterday will meet you again when tomorrow becomes today. When you stop carrying what was never yours, peace does not come as a sudden miracle. It arrives as a steady companion. It settles into your life quietly, strengthening you from within. You move forward not with fear, but with confidence rooted in trust. And in that trust, you finally experience what true rest feels like, not the absence of effort, but the absence of unnecessary burden. Many people wait to trust until they feel calm, certain, or emotionally secure. But trust was never meant to be a reaction to feelings. Feelings change quickly, often without warning. One moment you feel hopeful, the next you feel afraid. If trust depends on emotions, it will always be unstable. This is why the keynote that trust is a choice, not a feeling, is so powerful. Trust begins not when fear disappears, but when you decide to place confidence in God despite the presence of fear. Feelings respond to circumstances, but trust responds to truth. Circumstances shift daily. News changes, people disappoint, plans fall apart. If your faith rises and falls with these changes, your inner world will constantly be unsettled. Choosing trust means anchoring your heart to what does not change. God's character remains steady even when life feels chaotic. Making the decision to trust is an act of will, a conscious alignment of the heart toward God rather than toward fear. Fear often demands proof before it will rest. It asks for guarantees, clear timelines, and visible outcomes. Trust does not require proof. It requires surrender. When you choose to trust, you are saying, I may not understand what is happening, but I believe God is still good and still in control. This decision does not deny pain or confusion. It simply refuses to let uncertainty have the final word. One of the reasons trust feels difficult is because it challenges the need for emotional comfort. Worry can feel familiar, even safe, because it gives the illusion of preparedness. Trust feels risky because it asks you to release control before seeing results. Yet real security has never come from predictability. It comes from knowing who is with you when things become unpredictable. Trust is choosing relationship over reassurance. Choosing trust does not mean you will never feel afraid again. Fear may still rise, but it no longer governs your actions. You learn to move forward even when your emotions hesitate. This is how courage forms, not in the absence of fear, but in the decision to act faithfully despite it. Each time you choose trust over panic, your faith grows stronger, and your emotional responses slowly begin to follow your decisions rather than lead them. Trust as a choice also changes how you interpret challenges. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, how can God work through this? This shift transforms obstacles into opportunities for growth. You stop measuring God's faithfulness by your comfort and start recognizing it in his presence and guidance through difficulty. Many people confuse trust with passivity, but choosing trust is an active decision. It requires daily commitment. Some days it requires moment-by-moment recommitment. You may wake up feeling confident and end the day feeling uncertain. In those moments, trust becomes a discipline. You deliberately redirect your thoughts, remind yourself of truth, and choose faith again. Over time, this practice reshapes your inner life. Trusting God as a choice also frees you from emotional exhaustion. When you stop waiting for feelings to improve before trusting you, break the cycle of anxiety. You no longer need to analyze every emotion to determine your spiritual state. Instead, you ground yourself in the decision that God is worthy of your trust, regardless of how you feel today. This brings stability to the soul. Feelings are important, but they are not reliable leaders. They are meant to inform, not to command. When feelings take control, they often lead you toward fear. When trust leads, feelings gradually realign. Peace becomes more consistent, not because life becomes easier, but because your foundation is secure. You begin to experience calm, not as a fleeting emotion, but as a settled confidence. Choosing trust also deepens your relationship with God. It moves faith from theory into practice. You are no longer trusting only when things make sense. You are trusting when it costs you comfort. This kind of trust builds intimacy. It teaches you to rely on God not just as a solution provider, but as a constant presence. Over time, you will notice that your emotional reactions change. Situations that once triggered panic now invite prayer. Moments that once caused despair now awaken hope. This does not happen overnight, but it happens steadily. Trust reshapes the heart from the inside out. In the end, trust is not about eliminating fear. It is about deciding who will lead your life. When fear leads, peace disappears. When trust leads, peace follows. Each day offers you the same choice to react emotionally or to respond faithfully. And each time you choose trust, even when your feelings resist, you take another step toward lasting peace and spiritual strength. The desire to control is deeply rooted in the human heart. Control feels like safety. It feels like certainty. It promises protection from disappointment and pain. Yet the pursuit of control often becomes the very source of anxiety it claims to prevent. This is what peace and control cannot coexist. The more you try to manage every outcome, the more restless your spirit becomes. Control demands constant attention, constant effort, and constant vigilance, leaving no room for rest. Control thrives on the belief that if you plan enough, worry enough, and prepare enough, you can secure the future. But life does not submit to human planning. Unexpected changes, delays, and disruptions remind you that control is fragile. When control is threatened, fear rises. Anxiety grows because control has no power to guarantee outcomes. It only creates the illusion of certainty, which shatters under pressure. Peace, on the other hand, flows from surrender. Surrender is not giving up responsibility. It is releasing the obsession with outcomes. When you surrender, you acknowledge that your influence has limits and that God's sovereignty does not. This acknowledgement brings relief. The soul relaxes when it no longer has to pretend to be all-knowing and all-powerful. Peace enters where humility takes root. The attempt to control everything also isolates you from trust. When you insist on control, you rely on your own understanding above all else. You may still believe in God, but you keep him at a distance, inviting him to assist rather than lead. Control keeps God in a supporting role instead of placing him at the center. This imbalance creates spiritual tension because deep down, the soul longs to rest in something greater than itself. Control often disguises itself as wisdom or responsibility. It tells you that letting go is careless and that surrender is risky. But true wisdom knows the difference between diligence and domination. You are called to act faithfully, not forcefully. When you confuse effort with control, you begin to overextend yourself. Peace disappears because your inner world is constantly bracing for failure, letting go of. Control does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what belongs to God. You still plan, work, and make wise decisions, but you no longer measure your security by outcomes. You learn to do your part and trust God with the results. This shift restores balance. Effort remains, but anxiety fades. Control also creates inner conflict because it fights against reality. Life is unpredictable. People are imperfect. Circumstances change. Trying to control these realities leads to frustration and disappointment. Surrender aligns you with truth instead of fighting it. When you accept what you cannot control, you gain freedom within what you can. Peace grows when you release the need to know how everything will turn out. Control demands clarity before obedience. Surrender allows obedience without full understanding. This kind of faith quiets the soul. You stop asking for guarantees and start trusting God's guidance one step at a time. There is a hidden burden in control that many people do not recognize. Control keeps you constantly alert, never fully resting, always anticipating the next problem. Your body feels it. Your mind feels it. Your spirit feels it. Surrender breaks this cycle. It gives you permission to rest without fear, knowing that God remains at work even when you are not. When you let go of control, fear loses its grip. Fear depends on uncertainty combined with self-reliance. When you surrender to God's sovereignty, uncertainty remains, but self-reliance fades. This combination weakens fear and strengthens peace. You no longer face the unknown alone. Control also limits joy. When your focus is fixed on managing outcomes, you miss the beauty of the present moment. Surrender opens your eyes to what is happening now. Gratitude grows. Joy returns. Peace deepens, not because life is perfect, but because your heart is no longer trapped in constant tension. Choosing surrender is not a one-time decision. Control will try to return, especially in moments of stress. Each time it does, you are invited to release again. This repeated surrender builds trust. Over time, peace becomes more natural than anxiety. Letting go becomes easier than holding on. In surrender, you discover that God is trustworthy. You see his faithfulness in ways you could not when you were focused on controlling everything. Peace becomes a steady presence, not a fleeting emotion. You realize that control promised safety but delivered exhaustion, while surrender offered rest and delivered peace. Waiting is one of the most misunderstood experiences in the life of faith. When answers do not come quickly, the heart often assumes that God is distant, silent, or unwilling to act. Yet waiting is not evidence of absence. It is often the clearest sign that something deeper is unfolding beneath the surface. What feels like stillness to you may be movement in a direction you cannot yet see. God's work is not always loud or immediate, but it is always intentional. Human nature craves speed. We associate quick responses with care and delay with neglect. This mindset makes waiting emotionally painful. Each passing day without change feels like rejection, and each unanswered prayer feels like failure. But God's timing is shaped by wisdom, not urgency. He sees the entire picture, not just the moment you are standing in. Waiting allows space for alignment between what you desire and what will ultimately bless you. Preparation often happens before manifestation. Just as roots grow before fruit appears, spiritual growth often takes place in unseen ways. Waiting seasons develop patience, humility, and resilience, qualities that cannot be rushed. If answers arrive before these qualities form, the blessing might overwhelm you rather than strengthen you. What you perceive as delay may actually be protection, shaping you so that when the answer comes, you are ready to receive it. Waiting also reveals what you trust. When outcomes are delayed, faith is tested not in belief, but in posture. Do you grow bitter or hopeful? Do you withdraw or remain faithful? Waiting strips away shallow trust and exposes what is real. It invites you to rely on God's character rather than on immediate results. In this way, waiting refines faith, making it deeper and more enduring. Silence during waiting can feel especially painful. The absence of clear direction often leads to doubt. You begin to question whether you heard God correctly or whether you are being overlooked. But silence is not the same as indifference. God's silence often invites you to listen more deeply, not for new instructions, but for assurance of his presence. Waiting teaches you to recognize God not only in answers, but in companionship. Waiting shifts your focus from outcomes to obedience. When results are immediate, obedience can become transactional. You do the right thing and expect the right reward. Waiting removes that expectation. It teaches you to remain faithful even when there's no visible payoff. This kind of obedience strengthens your spiritual foundation. It anchors your faith in who God is rather than in what he gives. There is also healing in waiting. Rushed answers sometimes address symptoms without resolving deeper issues. Waiting allows God to work at the root level, restoring areas of the heart that need transformation. This internal work often goes unnoticed, but it is essential. When the external answer finally comes, it arrives alongside inner wholeness, not internal conflict. Waiting reshapes perspective. What once seemed essential may lose its urgency. What once felt devastating may reveal hidden mercy. Time creates distance that allows you to see why. Greater clarity. You begin to understand that some prayers, if answered immediately, would have limited your growth or diverted your path. Waiting teaches you to trust God's wisdom above your own desires. Remaining faithful in waiting requires courage. It is easy to trust when progress is visible. It is harder to trust when nothing appears to change. Yet it is in these quiet seasons that faith matures most. Waiting teaches you to lean on God not as a solution to a problem, but as a constant presence. This relational depth becomes the true reward of waiting. Waiting also strengthens hope. Hope is not passive optimism. It is resilient expectation. It looks forward without despair. Each day you choose to hope during waiting, you reinforce trust. Hope becomes less about timing and more about confidence in God's goodness. You stop measuring God's faithfulness by speed and start recognizing it in consistency. When waiting ends, and it does end, you often realize that the season itself was part of the answer. The growth, the clarity, the strength you gained were necessary components of what you asked for. Waiting prepared you to steward the blessing well. What once felt like a delay reveals itself as divine order. In the end, waiting is not about learning patience alone. It is about learning trust. It teaches you that God's timing is not slow, but precise, that his silence is not neglect, but intentional space for growth, and that every season of waiting is shaping you for what comes next, even when you cannot yet see it. Many people chase peace by trying to remove every difficulty from their lives. They believe peace will arrive when the conflict ends, when the problem is solved, or when the storm finally passes. But life rarely offers uninterrupted calm. Challenges come in waves, and waiting for perfect conditions often means waiting forever. This is why peace can not be rooted in circumstances. True peace is not the absence of storms. It is the presence of God within them. When peace depends on external stability, it becomes fragile. A single setback can steal it. A single bad report can undo it. Circumstances shift without warning, and if peace is tied to them, the heart is constantly vulnerable. But when peace is anchored in God's presence, it becomes resilient. Storms may rage, but the inner world remains steady. The problem may still exist, but it no longer defines your emotional state. God's presence changes how you experience hardship. It does not always remove pain, but it gives strength to endure it. When you know God is with you, fear loses its intensity. You may still feel concern, but it does not turn into panic. Confidence grows not because you see a clear path, but because you trust the one walking with you through uncertainty. There's a profound difference between being surrounded by chaos and being ruled by it. God's presence draws a boundary between what happens around you and what happens within you. Peace becomes a guard over your heart and mind. It allows you to face reality honestly without being overwhelmed by it. This kind of peace does not deny difficulty. It defies its power to dominate your soul. God's presence also provides reassurance when answers are delayed. In moments of uncertainty, the heart longs for clarity. Yet clarity does not always come immediately. Presence comes first. God meets you not always with explanations, but with companionship. This companionship is often what sustains you while you wait. Knowing you are not alone brings comfort that explanations cannot. Peace rooted in God's presence also reshapes fear. Fear thrives on isolation. It grows louder when you believe you are facing life alone. When you are aware of God's nearness, fear weakens. You may still acknowledge risk or uncertainty, but you do not face it unsupported. Presence transforms fear from a threat into a challenge you can face with confidence. God's presence invites trust even when logic struggles. There are moments when circumstances do not make sense and outcomes remain unclear. In those moments, peace does not come from understanding, but from surrender. Trust grows when you accept that God is near, even when you cannot see what he is doing. This trust quiets the heart. Living with an awareness of God's presence also brings rest. You no longer feel the need to constantly defend yourself or anticipate every outcome. You rest in the knowledge that God is actively involved in your life. This rest is not inactivity. It is freedom from inner turmoil. It allows you to move forward with clarity rather than anxiety. Peace through God's presence is cultivated, not automatic. It grows as you learn to turn your attention toward Him in the middle of stress. Instead of asking only for problems to be removed, you begin to ask for awareness of His nearness. This shift changes your experience of difficulty. The situation may remain challenging, but your response becomes calm and grounded. When peace is rooted in presence, gratitude becomes easier. You begin to notice moments of grace, even in hardship. Small mercies stand out. Strength appears where you expected weakness. Hope rises quietly. These signs remind you that God is working even when circumstances look unchanged. God's presence also gives courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to move forward despite it. When you know God is with you, courage grows naturally. You take steps you once avoided. You face conversations you once feared. Peace gives you the strength to act without panic. In time, you realize that storms did not destroy you because you were never facing them alone. Peace carried you through, not by removing difficulty, but by anchoring you to God. You stop waiting for perfect conditions and start living confidently in imperfect ones. True peace is not fragile or temporary. It is steady because it is relational. It comes from walking with God, not from managing circumstances. And once you experience this peace, you understand that no storm has the power to take it away because its source is not the world around you, but the God who remains with you through every season. Many people see surrender as loss, as if letting go means becoming powerless or defeated. The word itself can feel uncomfortable, especially in a world that celebrates control, strength, and self-reliance. Yet surrender, in its truest form, is not weakness at all. It is strength guided by wisdom. It is the courage to admit that some weights are too heavy for human hands and were never meant to be carried by human hearts. Strength is often misunderstood as the ability to endure silently, to handle everything alone, to never need help. This false definition pressures people to suppress fear, hide exhaustion, and carry burdens far beyond their capacity. Over time, this kind of strength leads to burnout, bitterness, and emotional collapse. True strength, however, knows when to release what cannot be sustained. It understands that endurance without surrender eventually becomes self-destruction. Surrender begins with honesty. It requires you to admit that you are tired, overwhelmed, and limited. This admission does not diminish you, it humanizes you. When you surrender your worries, you are not saying you do not care. You are saying you trust God enough to carry what you cannot. That trust is an act of faith, not failure. It takes far more courage to let go than to keep pretending you are in control. One of the reasons surrender feels difficult is because it exposes vulnerability. It forces you to face the truth that you cannot fix everything, predict everything, or prevent every pain. Yet vulnerability is not dangerous in the hands of God. It is the place where grace operates most freely. When you stop resisting your limitations, God's strength meets you there. Peace flows not from self-sufficiency, but from divine sufficiency. Holding on to worry creates the illusion of protection. It makes you feel prepared, alert, and responsible. But worry does not shield you from hardship. It only drains your strength before hardship arrives. Surrender removes this unnecessary burden. It allows you to respond to life as it happens rather than suffering through imagined futures. This shift restores emotional and spiritual energy. Surrender also realigns responsibility. You are responsible for faithfulness, not outcomes. When you try to control results, you take on a role that belongs to God. This role reversal creates anxiety because you were never equipped for it. Surrender places responsibility back where it belongs. You act wisely, pray faithfully, and then trust God with the rest. This balance brings relief. Letting go of worry does not happen once. It happens repeatedly. The mind will often return to old habits trying to reclaim control. Each time this happens, surrender becomes a renewed choice. This repetition does not mean failure. It means growth. Each act of surrender weakens worry's grip and strengthens trust's influence. Surrender also frees your emotions. When you stop carrying everything, you allow yourself to feel without being overwhelmed. Sadness does not turn into despair. Concern does not turn into panic. You experience emotions without letting them dominate you. This emotional freedom is a sign of inner strength, not weakness. Strength through surrender also deepens peace. Peace is not forced calm. It is settled assurance. It grows when the heart rests in God's care. This peace remains even when circumstances remain unresolved. You may still desire change, but you are no longer desperate for it. You trust that God is at work beyond what you can see. Surrender reshapes prayer. Instead of repeatedly asking for control, you begin asking for trust. Instead of demanding answers, you seek alignment. Prayer becomes less about managing outcomes and more about releasing burdens. In that release, peace enters naturally. You stop striving and start resting. There is also humility in surrender. It acknowledges that God's wisdom exceeds your understanding. This humility is not passive, it is grounded confidence. You trust not because you are certain of the path, but because you are confident in God's faithfulness. This confidence steadies the soul. Over time, surrender becomes a way of living rather than a reaction to crisis. You learn to release worries early instead of letting them pile up. You respond to uncertainty with trust rather than fear. This lifestyle preserves emotional health and spiritual clarity. When you embrace surrender as strength, you discover that peace was never found in holding on tight. It was found in letting go. God does not ask you to carry what he has already offered to carry for you. And when you finally place those burdens in his hands, you realize that surrender did not make you weaker. It made you free. The mind is one of the most powerful spaces in your life. What you allow to live there shapes how you feel, how you respond, and how you experience peace. Anxiety rarely begins with circumstances. It begins with unchecked thoughts. One fearful idea enters the mind, and if it is not challenged, it invites another. Soon, a single concern becomes a storm of anxiety. This is why your thoughts play such a decisive role in your peace. Thoughts are not neutral. They carry direction and influence. When fear-based thoughts dominate, the body responds with tension and restlessness. The heart races, the breath shortens, and the soul feels unsettled. Yet these reactions are not always caused by reality, but by interpretation. The mind rehearses possibilities that may never occur, and the body responds as if they already have. Peace fades because the mind is constantly signaling danger where none exists. Trust begins when you learn to recognize these patterns. Not every thought deserves your attention, and not every thought speaks truth. Some thoughts are rooted in fear, shaped by past wounds, or influenced by uncertainty. When you accept every thought without question, you surrender control of your inner world. Peace requires discernment, the ability to pause and ask whether a thought aligns with truth or fear. Challenging anxious thoughts is not denial, it is wisdom. It means examining what you are telling yourself and asking whether it is grounded in reality or assumption. Fear often exaggerates risk and minimizes God's faithfulness. It magnifies problems while ignoring past evidence of provision and guidance. Replacing these distorted narrative, with truth brings balance back to the mind. Trust grows when you intentionally recall God's faithfulness. Memory becomes a powerful tool against anxiety. When fear says, this situation is impossible, memory responds, God has made a way before. When fear predicts failure, memory reminds you of survival, growth, and unexpected strength. These reminders shift your focus from what could go wrong to what God has already done. Unchecked thoughts also steal peace by pulling you away from the present moment. The mind jumps ahead, imagining future losses or disappointments. In doing so, it disconnects you from the grace available now. When you challenge these thoughts, you return your attention to today. Peace is restored not by solving tomorrow, but by grounding yourself in the present where God's help already exists. Thought renewal is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. The mind naturally drifts toward fear, especially in times of stress. Each day requires conscious redirection. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a discipline. Just as the body needs regular care, the mind needs consistent guidance. Over time, this practice becomes easier. Peace becomes more familiar than anxiety. Trusting God also means choosing which thoughts you feed. Fear grows when it is constantly rehearsed. Trust grows when truth is repeated. What you meditate on strengthens you or weakens you. When you fill your mind with reminders of God's character, his goodness, faithfulness, and sovereignty, peace has room to grow. The mind becomes a place of refuge rather than conflict. Replacing anxious thoughts with trust does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means responding wisely without panic. Clear thinking emerges when fear is quieted. Decisions become more thoughtful. Reactions become calmer. Peace enhances clarity rather than diminishing it. There is also emotional freedom in mastering your thoughts. You begin to realize that you are not powerless against anxiety. You may not control every situation, but you can influence your inner response. This awareness restores confidence. Peace becomes something you protect, not something you wait for. As trust reshapes your thinking, you notice changes in your emotional life. Worry no longer escalates as quickly. Fear loses its intensity. Calm returns faster after stress. These shifts signal growth. They reflect a mind being trained to lean toward faith rather than fear. The battle for peace is often fought quietly, thought by thought. Victory comes not through force, but through consistency. Each time you choose truth over fear, trust strengthens its hold. Each time you challenge a negative assumption, peace gains ground. In time, the mind becomes a place of rest instead of resistance. Thoughts align more naturally with trust. Anxiety no longer dominates. Peace settles deeply, not because challenges disappear, but because your inner dialogue has changed. And as your thoughts align with truth, peace becomes a steady companion rather than a fleeting feeling. Worry has a way of pulling the mind out of the present and dragging it into an imagined future. It convinces you to live in moments that have not yet arrived, rehearsing problems that may never exist. While your body remains in today, your thoughts rush ahead, carrying emotional weight meant for another time. This disconnect creates anxiety because the soul was never designed to live in the future. Trust brings you back to where you are meant to be, fully present in the moment you are living now. The present moment is the only place where life actually happens. It is where decisions are made, where love is expressed, where growth occurs. Yet worry steals your attention from this space. It replaces today's reality with tomorrow's uncertainty. When your focus shifts away from the present, peace disappears, not because something is wrong, but because you have abandoned the place where grace is given. God provides strength in real time, not in advance. Grace is distributed daily, moment by moment, according to what you need right now. When you attempt to carry tomorrow's concerns today, you overload your heart with weight it was not meant to hold. This is why worry feels suffocating. You are demanding resources for a moment that has not yet arrived. Trust restores balance by reminding you that today already has what it requires. Living in the present does not mean ignoring the future. It means preparing wisely without being consumed by fear. Trust allows you to plan without panic. You do what is necessary today and leave tomorrow in God's hands. This approach keeps the mind clear and the heart calm. It replaces urgency with steadiness. When you anchor yourself in the present, you begin to notice God's provision more clearly. Small mercies become visible. Guidance appears in subtle ways. Strength rises when needed. These moments often go unnoticed when the mind is preoccupied with what might happen later. Peace grows when attention returns to now. Worry distorts time. It stretches moments of uncertainty into long seasons of fear. It makes future possibilities feel immediate and unavoidable. Trust corrects this distortion. It places each concern in its proper time. What belongs to tomorrow stays there. What belongs to today receives attention. This separation lightens the emotional load. The present moment is also where healing occurs. Past regrets and future fears both pull you away from now. When you live anchored in the present, you give yourself permission to heal, to breathe, and to experience peace. Trust quiets the mind enough for restoration to begin. Being present strengthens relationships. When worry dominates, you may be physically present but emotionally absent. Thoughts drift, attention divides, and connection weakens. Trust restores presence. You listen more fully, you respond more thoughtfully. Peace flows not only within you, but through you to others. The habit of presence must be practiced. The mind will naturally drift toward fear or regret. Each time it does, trust gently redirects it back. This redirection is not harsh, it is compassionate. It acknowledges fear without allowing it to rule. Over time, presence becomes more natural and anxiety loses its grip. Living in the present also deepens gratitude. When you are fully aware of now, you notice what is good, even in imperfect circumstances. Gratitude anchors the heart. It reminds you that even amid uncertainty, there is still grace, still provision, still reason to hope. Gratitude and peace grow together. Trusting God in the present moment builds confidence for the future. Each day you experience His faithfulness becomes a foundation for tomorrow. You do not need to imagine future strength when today's strength is already sufficient. Trust teaches you that God meets you where you are, not where you fear you might be. As you learn to live present, worry loses its urgency. Fear fades because it no longer has constant access to your thoughts. Peace takes root because the heart remains grounded. You stop rushing ahead and start walking steadily. In the end, trust does not eliminate uncertainty, but it relocates your focus. Instead of living in imagined futures, you live in lived moments. Instead of carrying tomorrow, you receive today. And in that space, right here, right now, peace becomes real, tangible, and sustaining. Trust is not built in a single moment of inspiration. It is formed through repeated decisions made in ordinary, often unnoticed moments. Many people wait for a dramatic breakthrough that will remove all fear and replace it with permanent peace. But peace does not arrive all at once. It is cultivated daily, strengthened each time you choose faith over fear. This is why peace is built through repeated trust, not through one-time resolve. Every day presents choices that shape your inner world. You choose how you respond to uncertainty, how you interpret setbacks, and where you place your confidence. These choices may seem small, but they are powerful. Each time you respond with trust instead of worry, you reinforce a pattern. Over time, these patterns shape your emotional and spiritual habits. What you practice consistently becomes what you experience naturally. Trust grows through repetition because fear does not disappear instantly. Fear often returns, testing whether your trust is temporary or committed. When fear reappears, you are given another opportunity to choose faith. This repetition is not failure, it is training. Just as physical strength increases through repeated effort, spiritual peace strengthens through repeated trust. Daily trust requires intention. You do not drift into peace, you decide toward it. In moments of stress, the mind automatically leans toward anxiety. Trust interrupts this reflex. It invites you to pause, to breathe, and to consciously place your confidence in God again. These pauses accumulate. Over time, they slow the pace of anxiety and create space for peace to grow. Repeated trust also rewires your responses. Situations that once triggered immediate worry begin to feel less threatening. The mind learns that fear does not need to lead. Experience reinforces faith. Each time you trust and discover that you are sustained, confidence increases, peace becomes more stable, less reactive. Peace built through repeated trust is resilient. It does not collapse under pressure because it has been tested. One-time trust may feel strong in calm seasons, but repeated trust holds firm in difficult ones. This kind of peace does not depend on perfect conditions. It remains steady because it has been practiced in imperfect ones. Daily trust also deepens your relationship with God. It moves faith from concept to companionship. You stop turning to God only in crisis and begin walking with Him in ordinary moments. This consistent connection builds familiarity and confidence. Peace grows because trust is no longer occasional, it is habitual. There are days when trusting feels easier and days when it feels costly. On difficult days, repeated trust becomes an act of endurance. You choose faith not because it feels good, but because it is right. These choices matter deeply. They strengthen peace at its roots, ensuring it will not easily be shaken. Repeated trust teaches patience. You learn that peace does not require immediate change. It requires steady reliance. You become less reactive, less hurried, and less controlled by emotion. Trust trains the heart to remain calm even when answers are delayed. Over time, repeated trust reshapes your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone ruled by worry, but as someone grounded in faith. This shift influences how you face challenges. Confidence replaces panic. Calm replaces urgency. Peace becomes part of who you are, not just how you feel. Peace built through repetition also creates SP, spiritual endurance. When new challenges arise, you are not starting from fear. You are starting from experience. You remember past moments of trust and draw strength from them. Peace carries forward, strengthened by memory and confidence. In the end, peace is not a destination you reach once. It is a way of living you choose daily. Each act of trust, no matter how small, adds to its foundation. Over time, these acts accumulate into a life marked by calm assurance rather than constant anxiety. Trusting God repeatedly does not eliminate uncertainty, but it changes how you live with it. Peace grows not because the world becomes predictable, but because your trust becomes consistent. And in that consistency, peace settles deeply, firmly, and faithfully within your soul.